Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Four, three, two, one. Welcome back, everyone. We're here today with Tiffany Grant. She is a financial expert, a debt coach. And in today's day and age, it's like when we're watching food prices go up, gas prices go up, inflation increasing, we don't need to be carrying a whole lot of debt. We need to find a way to get out of debt so that we can live our lives with as little stress and as healthy as possible. And that is the one thing that Tiffany Grant knows how to do. From a young age, she described herself, from a young age, I was always a money conscious. I remember being as 6, clipping coupons. Did anyone use them or not? No, but she found a way to get through the emotions of money and learn how to deal with money in the right way. When she got her first job at 16, she used coupons to get more bang for her buck, and once she saw how helpful they were, and she used coupons for everything. Cashiers were impressed by a teenager leaving with a cart full of items for only $20. Now, if you figure at the age of 16, she can figure out how to fill a groceries cart for $20. That she's got to know what the heck she's doing after she's put some education under her belt, because Tiffany does have a master in business. And with all that education, she's got to know how to strategize so that she can help us get out of debt. Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Michael, for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I didn't over embellish, did I?
No, it's fine. I was like, oh man, yeah, that's throwing back memories, but yes.
Yeah. I remember as a teenager, I hated clipping coupons. My mom used to like crack the ruler at you. Clip those coupons.
Well, see, so in my situation, nobody used coupons in my household. I was the only one that was like dead set on using coupons and saving money and all that stuff. And so I would go to the stores and, I would have my hoard of stuff, and my mom, I would go home and I'd be like, Mommy, guess how much this was? And she's like, how much, Tiffany? Because I'm sure I don't know. And then I'd be like, it was only $10, or it was only $20, or it was only $10, whatever. And she would just be like, this kid is something else. But I just thought it was so fun and interesting. Like, once I got the concept that coupons are money, then I was like, oh, so you mean to tell me like people just throw away money on a daily basis? Yeah. I'm like, I'm going to use these, as much as I can. And even to this day, I hate paying full price for anything. Like, I literally went to McDonald's the other day because I was out and about, and I got a free Happy Meal because I used their app, and that's what I ate for my lunch. So I just do not like paying full price for anything. So anytime I have to buy something, I'm looking up coupons, I'm looking up codes if it's online. I'm allergic to full price.
Well, I don't blame you. It kind of gives me paying full price. You know that rash you get on your hand.
Yeah, full price for me is like the plague. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do not
exactly.
like full price
Nobody.
anything.
I don't think anybody really likes paying full prices. Just that they get discouraged and settle for it.
Hmm.
Um, there was a time when I bought a brand new truck. I do mean brand new truck. Because by the time I did actually trade the truck in with 80,000 kilometers on it, that every last one of those kilometers, including the test drive, was mine.
Mm.
But I did not pay full sticker for that truck. I managed to find a truck that it was a fleet deal that was forgotten about.
Hmm.
Slashed the price. It was like a $90,000 truck that I only paid $32,000 for it.
Nice. And see, that's another thing too. The power of negotiating. So I know, like here in the States, right? Even when I did buy a brand new vehicle, which I will never do again, by the way, but even when I did, I went and I already did my homework. I knew how much I wanted to spend. I already had a backup plan if they didn't meet me at my number, because there's car dealerships like, one in the US, once you see one, there's like multiple. So I had already did test drives at the other ones. And so I'm like, okay, if they don't, come down to the number I'm trying to spend, then I'll just go over the Nissan, or I'll go over, the Toyota or
Right.
whatever, and get another car. So when I went in, I already had my number. I knew my research and all that stuff, because their job is to make as much money as possible. So you kind of have to play the same game. So they will try to wear you down. At least here in the States, I don't know if it's the same in Canada or not, but they will
Same
try
game.
to wear you down. You will be there all day, and just doing the negotiating part. They'll be like, oh, well, let me go ask my manager, and then the manager will come back and then say something, and then if you still hold out, they're like, okay, wait, let's try one more thing. It's just
Oh,
a whole game that
yeah,
they
yeah.
play.
Even up here is like people think I'm crazy, but you go to buy a car, right? I have my drink cup. and like and my most comfortable sweatshirt on and jeans. I don't care they have holes in them, or if my flip flops are kind of run over looking, but they're comfortable. Cause and they said, where are you going? And I was like, I'm going. We got to go look at a new car, right? And they're like, dressed like that. It's like, yup. Because I'm figuring I'm gonna be. I said I'll probably catch up with you at somewhere around dinner time, and then you can see what I actually got. He said dinner time, but it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. I said no. I plan on sitting here until I get what I want out of them, and if it takes me 8 hours to get it, it'll take me 8 hours to get it.
Yeah, and that's exactly the game they play. So usually people will break down. They're like, okay, we've been here for too long. I'm just ready to get this deal done, blah, 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 blah. And so they'll settle, for whatever it is that they can get. Now, me, when I went, it was probably like in the afternoon. By the time I was done, they were about to close. So that was another thing. Of course, the salesperson's like, "Ooh, I want to get this sale, before the end of the day." So that also gives you a little bit more bargaining power. But it was close to the end of the day, and I was just like, "Look, I'm cool with just sleeping on this. I can just walk out the door. I can go down to Nissan, because this was a Honda. I was like, I can go down to Nissan or Toyota and, take my money there. It doesn't really matter to me. I just need a car." And so I think I had talked to at least 3 to 4 people there, between the salesperson to the manager to the next person, and then they talk to like the finance person. The finance person get like, it was just a whole big thing. But at the end of the day, I got what I wanted, and then I was able to get the car for my price point, and also get some bonuses and stuff too. So that was another thing that I learned during that process, is that there's other things that you can get when you're buying a car. So for instance, in this case, it was like trunk liner and stuff like that because it was an SUV. And so they like threw some of that stuff in there too. And make sure you read your paperwork. That's important as well, because one thing that happened, unfortunately, is that they had promised something and it was in my paperwork, but then when I got the vehicle, it didn't have it. And so I said, oh, well, wait a minute. I already paid for this. It's in the paperwork. And so they had to provide that to me. So that's another tip as well for people. Make sure you know what you're paying for. Yes, look over that big book of paperwork that they give you. But sometimes dealerships, because I mean, it, not all of them are shiesty. It could have been that somebody just forgot or what have you. Could have been a mistake. But whatever the case may be, had I not looked over my paperwork, I wouldn't have known that I was missing that item. And then, it just would have been a sunk cost. So make sure you go over your paperwork and see what you're signing up for. And then make sure that you have everything that you signed for whenever you buy a car. So I know we kind of went off on a tangent there about car buying, but I think it's super important for people to know as well.
Yeah. Well, is it really a tangent when we're talking about strategies on how to save ourselves debt and interest money, right? Is it really that far of a tangent? Because
Right.
a good car deal could, if a bad car deal could cost you how many thousands of extra money in interest payments, right?
Absolutely. And see,
So
here's the thing too, which I said, I will personally never get a new car again. So the first 3 years of a car's life. So, thinking about the car's life, the first 3 years when it takes the biggest depreciation hit. So, every car that I've had after that, once I learned that lesson, every car that I've had after that made sure that it was at least 3 years old. So that way I don't have to take that depreciation hit. Somebody else already did, and I'm just reaping the fruits of their harvest, because that's when it depreciates the most. So if you get a brand new car, or any car really, you drive it off the lot, it's already depreciating. But the first 3 years, the depreciation is the highest. So that would be my tip as well. If people aren't caught up on having the newest and the greatest, make sure it's at least 3 years old, and then you'll get a better deal on it.
yeah, yeah. So it doesn't always have to have 0 miles when you pull off the lot, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And also another thing too, even the car that I did buy new, they were using it for, what did they say? Because it already had like 2,000 miles on it or something like that. Because I
Mm-hmm.
guess maybe one of the employees was test driving it or what have you. But I was able to get a better deal just because it was one of those cars, like where the employees were using it or whatever had happened to where it wasn't 0 miles. I was able to get a little better deal. So that's another thing. If you do want the newest and greatest, this model year, next model year, see if they have one where the employees have been using it or something like that,
Yeah.
because then you're able to get it for a little cheaper than
Yeah.
one with 0 miles.
Yeah. Well, in the case where when I bought that particular truck, it was a Ram. When I bought that one, it had been forgotten about by a tow truck company.
Hmm.
So they just wanted it gone. That's the reason why they were willing to slash the price as far as they would. But
Wow.
I had a 20-mile test drive on it. When I took it home, it had 25 miles on it, or kilometers in this case. So I was
Wow.
like,
That
but it had been forgotten about, and that was the whole point. Is the dealership hadn't forgot about it? It was the fleet client who forgot about it. So they
wow.
just wanted it gone because they
Wow.
need the lot for a newer vehicle.
Wow. That is a
so
great.
so that's another way people can get, you know, look to see if there's a fleet deal on there. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so yeah. Anyway, what we really want to talk about though is interest rates and how like I said, that when you're sitting there negotiating a car, they're going to come at you several times with several different types of loans and different interest rates, and we keep running into all those different interest rates, even when we're looking at our credit cards and unsecured debt, even a mortgage rate. That's still an interest rate, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
how do we deal with all that?
Yeah, so interest rates are all around us and they vary so much. Like, for instance, here in the States, our Federal Reserve has been raising the Fed funds rate, which is the rate that dictates um, what percentage the banks can trade amongst each other when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
currency. And they just went up 0.75%, so 75 basis points. Now, what happens when that happens is that everything else goes up as well. So savings rates go up, so that's good for us, but also debt interest rates go up too. And so mortgage rates are higher, credit card rates are higher, car loans are higher,
Mm-hmm.
things of that. And so, and then also there's another variable, which is your credit score. So your interest rate is also dependent on what your credit score is. So, the higher your credit score, the better interest rate you'll get, the lower the interest rate you'll get. And so there's a lot of things that go into calculating what your interest rate would be for whatever purchase you're trying to make. Now, keep in mind, if it's something that's secured, so we're talking about houses, we're talking about cars, um, with those types of interest rates, they'll typically be lower than stuff that's unsecured, like a credit card. So that's why you'll see credit cards with higher interest rates than like a car loan or a house loan, because there's nothing that they can come after if you don't pay. Now, that's also why sometimes people will do a strategy where they'll take home equity out of their house to pay down credit cards, because now they're transferring the balance to their home, which is now secured, and so that rate is typically lower. So interest rates are very interesting. Um, for the most part, we can't really control them, but we can control what rate we get depending on how our credit score is. So that's what I tell people, if you are interested in buying a house, a car, whatever it is, just know the higher your credit score is, the better rate you'll get. So if you're trying to get a lower rate, then make sure you work on your credit score, because that's the only variable that you can really control. Now, I will say here in the States, home interest rates have gone up. So that's cooling down our home market, right? So a lot of
Right.
people are asking, well, Tiffany, should we still buy even with the rate, high? And my answer is always, well, it depends, just like any good lawyer, it depends now. But it truly does depend, because if your goal is to get a house and your finances can afford it with the high interest rate, then go ahead and get it, because at the end of the day, you can always refinance. For instance, rates have been higher than this before in the past, and people were happily paying their mortgages and stuff. And then when they started seeing the rates go lower, they just refinanced their house, and now they're at a lower rate. That's what I did last year for my own house, and my rate wasn't even that high. I think it was 4.25 before I refinanced, but now it's at 3.25 if I'm not mistaken. So
Right.
I saved a whole percentage point, which in the grand scheme of things, when you're looking at a house, could be thousands of dollars. So, you can't really time any market, because they always shift, they always change, and we can't control the future, but we can control today. So if your goal is to buy a house, make sure you get your credit score up, make sure your finances can support it, then by all means, go right ahead. You don't have to wait until interest rates come down or whatever the case may be, because we don't know when that's going to happen. So that would be my biggest tip for people too, is if they are in this environment and they want to buy a home, then to go ahead if your finances can support it, and then you can always refinance later for that lower rate.
Yeah. Here in Canada, that unlike the U.S., they have a 5-year system. It's a 30-year mortgage, but they have a 5-year system where they actually recheck all of your numbers and all that kind of stuff. So,
Oh, wow.
um,
So I have a question about that because that's pretty cool. So every 5 years, they'll check and make sure you have the best rate for that time.
yeah, they actually will check your rates and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. hmm
Wow.
So
That is so
it's
cool.
a pretty cool system that way. Um, and if your finances aren't exactly what it becomes that warning system. Hey, look at what you're doing a little closer. So
Mm.
something that doesn't exactly exist in the United States. I've had property on both sides, so
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
but yeah. And we do also have the Bank of Canada, which the ultimate federal, like the Federal Reserve, controlling those interest rates, and they did much the same thing that you just said.
mm-hmm,
Actually, twice
mm-hmm.
before, from spring till fall, twice they've actually raised it. Was it 75 points? Was it? I think it was. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, but I like what you're saying that we shouldn't allow all that sort of stuff scare us from doing what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because, like I said, it's all variables. We don't know what the future is going to hold. But if you're looking at your finances today and you can afford the interest rate that's out there today, then why not? Like, why wait? It's kind of like, when people say, oh, well, I'm going to buy when the market's low. But we don't know when it's going to bottom out. Like, we can assume, like, for instance, today, like, everything is down quite a bit. A lot of stocks in the US market have hit their 52-week lows as of Monday. But we don't know if that's going to be the bottom. And so the best thing to do is just invest when you're going to invest. And so it's the same thing with the housing market. It's the same thing with any market, really. Even when you look at cars, right? So typically cars depreciate and they're usually less than what you buy them for. But what we saw this year, especially earlier in the year, was that used cars were selling for way more. Like, for instance, I had a used van. Now, of course, it also depends on what kind of car it is. But I had a used van that was selling for what, 20,000 more than what I owed on it. And so that was something that was very unique in the market this year, is that used cars, because there was such a shortage due to COVID, they weren't able to build new cars and stuff like that. And so there was such a shortage on cars that even used cars were selling for pretty good. So, you just never know what's going to happen.
Right.
So the best thing to do is if your finances can support it, you've already crunched the numbers, you're okay with it, then just go ahead and do it, because there's no way to tell what the future is going to look like.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like that's pretty amazing. Though it's that much more than wow. Okay.
Oh, I was like this close to selling it. I was like, ooh, like I need to take advantage of this. But I was
Right.
like, no, Tiffany, that's another thing too. Emotions. Money is very emotional. Like this year, I was ready to sell my house because housing prices were skyrocketing. And like, for instance, my house, I bought it at 110. I think I only owe like 100. And this year I could have sold it at the beginning of the year for like 200 and something. So I was like, "Ooh, let me sell my house." But then I was like, "Well, pause, Tiffany, because if you sell it, where are you going to go? If your house is priced at this level, then of course all around you, the rent market, the house market, everything was high. So it's like, okay, if you sell your house, then what? Like, where are you going to go?" So then I had to pause and hit the brakes on that because it just didn't make sense, even though the money looked really good. And emotionally, like when I say I was getting my house ready, like I was getting it showroom ready, I was going to hire my friend who's a house cleaner, and we were just going to like zhuzh it up. I had already called my real estate agent, everything. And then I was like, wait a minute, Tiffany, like,
Yeah.
let's put our thinking cap on here. Like, where are you going to go? And then also with the car, for instance, with the van, my goal with it is to use it as, because it's a sprinter van. So I want to use it as like the RV, how people are doing van life or what have you. So I was like, okay, if I sell it, then I won't have that option anymore. So I'm like, okay, let's hit the brakes on that. Is that really what you want to do? Or are you just looking at the money flashing and you're like, ooh, let me do this? And so, sometimes we have to keep our emotions in check, whether it's for good or bad, when it
Yeah.
comes to our finances, because it's highly emotional.
Yeah, we hear that over our current truck. It's a GMC Yukon, and people are like, "Well, aren't you going to? You're always taking it back up to the shop." It's like, yeah, for oil changes, whatever, right? Had the front end fixed on it because there's like big words for some of the parts that are underneath there. I don't get what all of them are, but they said it was part of the 4-wheel drive thing. It's like, okay, well, I guess that's got to get fixed, you know. And they're like, well, why didn't you just trade it in? And it's like, because if I traded in, it's like I only paid this. I only paid like a few $100s here. I'm going to trade that truck in, and then have to spend retail. Full retail is almost $90 to $100,000 for a new one, and then I have to pay that bill every month. It's like I'd rather pay this and then pocket the rest of that money towards something
Exactly,
else I want,
exactly.
right? So it's about
I
priorities too, isn't it?
Yeah, and see, that's the thing. Like, I'm glad you brought up that example because I'm going through car stuff right now with my main car, right? So my main car is paid off. It's been paid off for quite some time. It's mine. I have the title, all that good stuff. And it seems like ever since I paid it off, it's like something going wrong with it. So now it has an oil leak, right? Now the oil leak, I had my mechanic come take a peek, and he's like, okay, it needs this, it needs that, whatever, whatever, then we can get it fixed. And I asked him, I said, well, at this point, because it's like, every few months or so you're coming to fix it, at this point, does it make sense to just get something else? And he was like, Tiffany, if it's not the engine or the transmission, he said, you can just keep, doing these little fixes. It's fine. He said, once it's the engine or the transmission, then that's when you should start looking for something else. And I was like, okay, because back to emotions again. I'm like, oh, like I don't want to keep spending $100 here, $100 there, 200 here, to do all these little fixes, and then other things are going wrong, So like two of the switches now to put the windows down, they're not working. It's just little stuff like that. My little uh cigarette lighter where I plug in my phone, that's starting not to work. So it's like little things just happening. And I'm just like, like, is it time? And he said, as long as it's not the engine or the transmission, just get that stuff fixed, like whatever makes you comfortable. So I was like, okay, okay. So that's kind of where I'm at too. I'm like, all right, do I sit here and fix it, which actually is a better financial decision? Or do I go and get a new car? Then you have to factor in, and this is what I tell people too. When you go buy cars, you know, buy up in car, you have to think about not only the car payment every month, the new amount that you have to pay for insurance, the new amount you have to pay for taxes, because usually the newer the car, everything goes up. And so I was like, okay, Tiffany, it does make more sense to just use this car that I'm not paying every month for. It's already paid for. The insurance is really low because it's paid for, so I only have to get liability. And then also the taxes are really low because it's a pretty old car. It's like 2010. So I don't have to spend an arm and a leg on keeping this car up. Now, if I go get a new one, it's going to look completely different. So, that was just his tip to me. He was like, if it's not the engine or the transmission, then just fix it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's pretty much so where we are with this one is like, especially 4-wheel drive, full size SUV, they get expensive, and like your Sprinter van. It get expensive, and it's like, nah, let's just fix this.
Exactly, exactly. So there's little things that you can do throughout the day, or even because I tell people, look at your biggest expenses and see how you can save. So, like your biggest expenses are typically housing, typically car. If you do have a car payment,
Yeah.
food. Going out to eat or the grocery
So
store because
yeah.
everything's expensive now. So I
Oh
tell people
yeah.
to look at their biggest expenses, like yeah, the $5 at Starbucks or whatever,
Do
if
you actually
Starbucks is
spend
important
five
to you,
dollars at Starbucks, or do you spend
say it again.
$2? Do you actually spend $5 at Starbucks, or do you spend $2 at Starbucks?
I don't spend anything at
There
Starbucks
you
personally.
go. Even better.
Personally, I don't spend anything. I think the last thing I've had at Starbucks, I was in the airport and that was the only option available. And then I tried to use a gift card because I had a $10 gift card that I've been sitting on for years. And so I tried to use that and they were like, oh, we don't take the gift cards here. And I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah,
So I actually
Starbucks.
had to spend money at Starbucks.
Oh my god. Yeah, yeah.
But
I usually buy drip coffee. I don't buy the fancy double shot, blah blah blah, extra foam. I had listened to some of the things that people that are like, are you gonna drink it? Or are you gonna like? What are you gonna do with that?
look, honestly, I don't even like coffee like that. So even if I have to, like for instance, if I do get something from Starbucks, it is like the least coffee-ist thing I can get. So like for
That's
instance,
yeah.
I'll go in and I say, what has the least amount of coffee? And so there's like one called the chocolatey chocolate something. And so that's usually what I default to because I just don't even like coffee. So, I only have to do it out of necessity like every once in a while, which this time it was the airport and that was the only thing open. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, since you brought up Starbucks and people with their ridiculous coffee orders,
which was not the point, by the way.
that is
But,
not totally not the point. But what if we have let the ridiculous like overrun our finances, and we got like a paycheck that's a um, annual paycheck of say $100,000,
Mhm.
and we got something like $400,000 worth of unsecured debt. What do we do?
Yeah, so like any good lawyer, it depends, right? Because my thing is, it depends on what's important to you. Okay, right? So I have clients where what's important to them is paying off debt. They want to pay off debt any means necessary. That's what's important to them, and so that's what we do.
That
And
could be
so
a
if that's
dangerous
the
thing, though. You said any means
okay,
necessary. That could be dangerous.
well, within reason.
See, within
So
reason sounds better.
we're not gonna. I'm not gonna tell them to go rob a bank or something.
I'm not exactly suggesting rob a bank, but by any means necessary, we got to pull them back off the fence, don't we? So that they're not like um, doing things that would be desperate to their health, as well as what I
Oh
was
yeah.
really getting at.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for instance, just to give you an example, and when I say any means necessary, I'm not talking about ridiculous, but like, if they have to bypass a vacation or bypass going out with friends or something like that,
Yeah,
that's what I mean by like any
that
means
that's
necessary.
reasonable.
Right. So that's what I said within reason. But if that's their goal, right? If paying off debt is their goal and they're like, this is what's important to me, this is what's keeping me up at night, this is what I want to get rid of, then that's what we focus on. And so sometimes that might look like I just said, saying no to friends or, cutting back on certain things. It just depends. Now, if it's somebody where they're like, I really don't care about this debt. I know it's 400,000. but look, I really don't care. I just want to live my life and I just want to do what's important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Then okay, then we'll focus on that. It just depends on the person. I'm a strong believer in following your values and following your goals when it comes to your money. And so I'm never going to press my beliefs on someone else because we all
Right.
have different values, we all have different goals. So like with me, I am so debt averse. I hate debt. I don't like debt. Like if I have debt, that's the main thing I want to do. But for other people, it's not like that sometimes. And so for me, it's really getting down to, okay, what's important to you? And then let's make up a plan on how we can accomplish those things. So like I have some clients where they're like, I'm never paying my student loans, which I'm like, I don't agree with personally. Like, you should definitely pay your student loans. But if that's not important to you right now, let's focus on what's important to you right now. You get what I'm saying? So
Right.
that's why I said it depends on what the person. So just to focus on a quick tip, look over, just get in touch with what your values are. Then use your values to shape your goals. And then use your budget or your spending plan to follow those goals. That's pretty much how I approach money. Versus just going with boilerplate, advice that you see rampant out there. You kind of want to make it personal to you because personal finance is personal. And if you attach what you're trying to do with your money to your values and your goals, you're more likely to stick with it too. If you're just going off of, ooh, I need to be debt free because that's what Dave Ramsey says, and you don't have a strong why as to why you're doing it, then the chances of you sticking to it is slim to none. So that's why I tell people to approach it from that perspective, get it attached to your values, get it attached to your goals, and then focus on what you want to do to accomplish it.
Yeah. You make getting out of debt sound like going on a diet.
Well, see,
If you don't
okay,
have a strong enough goal,
I'm so glad you mentioned that though, because for instance, when I'm working with clients, a budget spending plan, whatever you want to call it, money manifestation tool, I look at it as giving me freedom, right? And so that's the mind switch thing. It's not trying to restrict you like a diet, that type of thing. It's really giving you freedom to do the things that you want to do, while also accomplishing your goals. So that's kind of how I look at budgeting and, having a spending plan is this is allowing me to get stuff done, versus restricting me from getting things done.
right. So, you know, we hit that point in the show where I had to say, "Hey, we're starting to run out of time." Oh my God! But it's been fun and very interesting as we're talking about that and how similar things are between U.S. and Canada also because a lot of things are going to be the same. Um, is there like maybe the top 5 things that you usually tell people to actually just hold on control of their finances? Top 5 tips just to hold on to control of your finances.
Yeah. So the first thing is, like I said, make sure that you are attaching your finances to goals, and your values. I think that's the biggest tip. Also, make sure, so I'll say that's number one. Number two, make sure you understand your relationship with your money, because a lot of people don't understand their relationship with money, and they might be a spender, but they're not understanding why they're doing that spending. And so that would be tip number two, is to get that under control as well. Just figure out, why do I do the things that I do? Is it how I was raised? Is it what I saw? Is it society? Is it friends? And kind of get a hold on what that looks like. Then number three, I will say definitely have a spending plan regardless of what it looks like. Like I have some clients where they don't get into the nitty gritty with their budget as far as like putting it in an Excel or on an app or whatever. But what they do is they have different bank accounts for different things, and that's what works for them. So there's so many different ways that you can create a spending plan, but I highly suggest doing it because that's how you're going to reach goals. Otherwise, you're going to be on a hamster wheel going over and over trying to figure out why you don't have any money or figuring out why you're not getting to your goals, but it's because you don't have a clear plan in place. I would say the next is to look at your biggest expenses and see how you can cut those down. That has saved me the most money versus, trying to figure out, okay, if I don't spend $5, well, I'm going back to Starbucks, but if I don't spend, let's say $5 at McDonald's, twice a week, yeah, that'll save you money, but your biggest expenses and trying to get those cut down will save you even more. So I highly suggest looking at that first, looking at your steady bills. So like all the bills that come to your house on a monthly basis, seeing how you can get those down. There are different programs, which I didn't even get to hit on. I know here in the States, ever since COVID, there's been a program, if you qualify, where you can get $30 put on either your cell phone bill or your internet bill. And so that's part of like COVID relief. And a lot of people don't know about it, but there's different programs for different things. So just see what's available and try to knock down those big bills. And then I think I'm on number 5.
Yeah.
And then also make sure you have some type of savings in place, because I can tell you that gives you the biggest peace of mind. Even if, because you hear some of the fluff sometimes where people are like, oh, don't put money in savings. It's not doing anything for you. It's not making you money, put it somewhere else, blah, blah, blah. Look, at the end of the day, having a cushion there gives you so much peace of mind where you can actually think straight and can help you in so many different ways in that regard. So I highly recommend having some type of money put to the side, and you can start with anything. I have a savings challenge on my website where it takes you through 30 days of savings, and it's like 1 week you could do $1. And I'm sure if you just look around your house real quick, you could probably find $1. Another week it might be $5 or what have you, but by the end of it, you'll have about 1,000 or some odd dollars saved up. And so there's different ways that you can start saving money. Even if you're on a tight income restraint, you can still save. So don't think that saving is not attainable, regardless of where you are in your income. It totally is. You just have to find it. So that would be my next tip, is just to make sure you have some type of savings as well.
So, okay, and your website is where?
Yes, so thank you. So you can find me moneytalkwitht.com. My podcast is Money Talk with Tiff. It's also a blog. I'm on all social media planets. They do seem like planets. All social media channels at Money Talk with T. So there's a lot of different ways you can get my resources, and they're all free. So definitely tap in. There's a ton of information out there. You just have to want to get it.
Yeah. I would suggest everybody, if you are listening to this and you're already enjoying podcasting, because I know that Money Talk with Tiff is on Apple Podcasts and every place that this particular podcast that you're listening to is on. So go look for that and work with Tiffany. She's a wonderful person, and she knows what she's doing with money. So in the short time I've known her, she's taught me a couple of lessons also. So, yeah. Thank you for listening, everyone. And we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.